Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Ayomide, and if this is your first time here, you are most welcome. On this channel, I post tutorials on how to sew various garments, and in this tutorial, I'm going to be sharing how I carried out this bust caging. It's a way of giving more structure to the bust area, and when you do this, you don't have to use a bra cup, that's a commercially produced bra cup, for your corset. So this tutorial is a prerequisite if you want to know how to make corsets. So guys, let us jump straight to the tutorial. To get started, I have my basic bodice pattern right here, and I'm going to be modifying this to a corset pattern where we are going to be extracting our cups from. I have my waist dart drawn out, and I have the bust dart also drawn out. The first thing I'm going to be doing is right from the center front, I'm going to be marking half an inch from the neckline all the way down to the waistline. If you are conversant with corset making, you will know this is a crucial step in making corsets. Once I'm through with that, I'm going to be getting half of my shoulder slant. Measuring my shoulder slant, I have about 4.5 inches, and half of that would be 2.2 inch. So I'm going to be marking half of that, and I'm going to be connecting that measurement all the way down to the bust line. Once I'm through with that, right from the chest line, I'm going to be marking half an inch downward. Now, this is not a standard. You could go as deep as your bust line. It depends on how you want to review. And I'm going to be squaring that line to the center front. Afterwards, I'm going to be drawing the shape of the cup. Note that this is not the final shape. I still went on to remodify the neckline of the cup, or rather the shape of the cup, later on, but this is what we are going to be working with first of all. So using my hand, I'm going to do a freestyle first of all before using my pattern master to further reinforce the cup shape. Once I'm through with that, I'll go ahead and contour the upper area of the cup, and I'm going to be marking 0.75 inch away on both sides. That is on the line that we drew from the shoulder slant all the way to the bust line. So I'm going to be marking 0.75 inch away on both sides and connect it with a straight line to the bust point. And this part here is going to be taken off, so I'm drawing a zigzag to indicate that I'm going to be taking this part out. Once that is done, right from the under bust line, I'm going to be measuring 1.2 inches diagonally, and this is just to serve as a guide for the shape of my cup. It doesn't necessarily mean that your cup, the shape has to meet up with that point, but if it meets up, it is fine. It's just to serve as a guide. So I'm using my hand to create the shape of the cup all the way down to the dart line that cuts across the under bust area, and then I can also use my pattern master to smoothing the shape around the under bust. But before going on, I was supposed to do my under bust contouring, which I did not. So what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be measuring 7.5 inch, which is the quarter of the under bust measurement I'm working with, excluding the dart. So I'm placing that measurement right from my center front, and I have 3 inches. So I'm going to be excluding the dart and continue my measurements with the same 3 inches all across the under bust line until I have 7.5 inches, which is the quarter of the measurement I'm working with. So I'm going to be marking 7.5 inches and mark out what I have left, which is about 0.5. So I'm going to be marking 0.5. That is what I would use to tighten the under bust. That is the excess that is remaining from the under bust. So I'm going to be connecting that line all the way to the waistline. So this is one way I do my under bust contouring. After that, I will go further to draw the shape of the cup around this side of the on the bust. Moving on, I'm also going to be drawing the shape of the cup around the side of my pattern, and for this I'm going to be using my pattern master as a guide. So you can use any curved ruler that you have as a guide. You can also start with your hand and finish off with the curved ruler that you have. The goal is to have a curved shape around this area of your on the bust. I'm also going to be adjusting the shape of the cup around this side. So I'm taking my shape right from one of the dart lines, and I'll make sure it blends with my cup. So you want to make sure that your cup shape, the upper part, blends with this side of your cup. Now looking at this pattern, this is how a corset pattern is being made. Right from this pattern, you can also work on your corsets. So this is more like a two-in-one tutorial, how to draft a corset and how to carry out bust caging. So the first thing I'll do while cutting out this pattern is I'm going to be closing my darts, my bust darts, and in order to close my bust dart, I would have to open my waist darts. Because I close my dart, you can see that the shape of my cup is not matching up. All I have to do is just to blend it in and make sure that the shape of the cup matches together. So I'm going to be using a paper tape to place this down, after which I'll go over and then take out the shape of my cup right from this pattern. Before eliminating my darts completely, I'll go over and label my cup so that I don't get confused. So right here I have the center front, side front, and side front, and that's because I'm going to be splitting this cup into about 3 different patterns. And to do that, I'm going to be splitting the cup from the bust line. I would split it into two. So I'm picking this part of my cup. I'll split it into two from the bust line. I would also do likewise for the other half of the cup. Bear in mind that your corset cup can take any shape, but this is just the shape that I want to work with. After splitting this into two, I'm going to be joining the upper part of the corset cup together, making sure that the chest line aligns, and then I'm going to be using my masking tape to place the both of them together so that they can be a single piece of pattern. Looking at this pattern piece, you will see that one part is not blending well. I'm going to be using my pen now to smoothen it in and trim off the excess. This is as a result of the darts that we took out from that region. These are all of the pattern sets I'm going to be working with. I have the other part, the upper part rather, as number 1, the lower center front as number 2, and the lower side front as number 3. What I'll go ahead and do next is to cut these on my fabric and also on the interfacing that I'm going to be working on. I have placed the patterns on the fabric I'm using, and I've added the required seam allowances all around. What I'm going next to do is to cut this out. I'm done cutting on the fabric, and this is the interfacing I'm working on. It is called collar stay here. You need something sturdy to work on. You can also work with wording. You can work with this type of interfacing called the collar stay or the peplum stay. So I'm also going to be placing my pattern on this, and I'm going to be cutting it out just the exact way I cut out my fabric. The purpose of this interfacing is that we are going to be doing the caging on the interfacing just so that your seam lines would not show on the right side of your fabric. I'm on my sewing machine now, and it is time to sew. I've ironed the interfacing on the wrong side of my main fabric, and this is the interfacing that I cut out. No need to iron in interfacing since it is also an interfacing itself. The first thing I will do is to join my fabric pieces together, and I'm going to be starting with the lower center front and the lower side front. So I'm going to be placing right sides against each other, and I will go ahead and sew this down. This is what it looks like after joining them together. The next thing I will do is to join the upper part of the cup to the lower part, and I'm going to be doing that by placing right sides against each other, and I'll go ahead and sew this down so it becomes one piece. This is the results. This is what I have after joining. I would repeat likewise for the interfacing too, after which we can now start working on the caging. Moving on, I'm going to be marking half an inch away on the interfacing, and this will serve as a guide where we want to do the caging. It will serve as where the boning will start and where it would end, as it is a boning that we are going to be using for the caging. I'm done marking the half an inch all around. After that, I'm going to be dividing my cup into three, and I'm just going to be guessing these. So I'm going to be using my hand to draw a line from the topmost part of the cup to the lower part of the cup. These are also where our boning would be sewn on. Now you can have this at the back of your mind that you're not limited to the lines that I have drawn here. You can do as much as you want, but bear in mind that the more you do, the more structured your cup is going to be, and the less you do, the less structured your cup is going to be. This is the boning I'm going to be using for this, and it is a sew on boning, a Regilene boning, and I'm going to be sewing at the seam line of the cup. There are two ways in which I attach my Regilene boning. I can use the zigzag stitch on my domestic sewing machine or the straight stitch on my industrial sewing machine. First of all, I'm going to be illustrating with the zigzag stitch on my domestic sewing machine, and I'm starting with the middle seam that joins the upper part of the cup to the lower part of the cup. After doing this, I would recommend that, or rather I would say that it was easier to join with the straight stitch than the zigzag stitch. However, if you prefer the zigzag stitch, you can also work with it. This is the outcome of stitching with a zigzag stitch. I had to do the stitch twice because initially the thread was skipping, but if yours is not skipping, it's a good way to stitch down your Regilene boning, and this is the outcome. The next thing is to stitch the vertical lines, and for this I'm going to be using my industrial sewing machine. If you look closely at your Regilene boning, you will see this very small clear area, and that is the area I'm going to be stitching on, meaning I'm going to be stitching on two sides of the Regilene boning. And for this you would have to be very careful, especially when you are stitching one bone on another bone. You don't want to rush so that your needle doesn't break, and you also don't want to miss your seam line because that area is very small to sew on. I'm done fixing all of the bone on the lines that I have drawn. If you can stop this way, or you can go ahead to further cage your bust or your cup, corset cup. And another thing you can do is you can sew a boning here on the upper part of the cup, and also sew another boning on the lower part of the cup. Remember I said the more you cage, the more structure you have, and I'm only going to be sewing on the upper part of the cup for this tutorial. I'm done sewing, and the next step would be to place the interfacing in the main fabric so that this can become a single piece of cup. And for this you would have to make sure that your seam lines are matching correctly, the side seams are matching, and also the bottom seam that joins the lower center front and the lower center back are also matching correctly. And so once that is ensured, if you have any excess you can always trim out, and once you have done that, what you would do would be to stitch this together all around, and this becomes a single piece. Once I was through with that, I went ahead to trim off the excess of the interfacing that I have, and this is my cup. You can see the structure that the boning gave to the cup, and I love the idea of doing your caging on the interfacing so that your seam lines doesn't show on the main fabric. So if you were making a corset, you would have to make two of these, one for the left and one for the right. If you found this tutorial helpful, kindly give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, kindly do so, and until my next tutorial guys, goodbye.